Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. We're into race season now. The big spring classic weekends, which I guess were spread over a couple weekends, just happened. So that was exciting and nerve-wracking as a coach. And then how are you feeling after you have sort of 3 weeks here out from your big 100-miler? So I imagine you're sore.
We like to think about it as 4, even though really it's 3 at this point. I don't know.
I thought you meant that you think of sore as 4, and I was like, because it rhymes?
No.
You mean you have
No, time is
okay.
ticking away, that's for sure.
Okay, so Molly's going to the Sulphur Springs race. I guess it's an ultra race of varying distances and formats, but you're doing the 100-mile.
Yeah, feeling good. Had a big weekend of training here, and just kind of everything seems to be going well. It's that weird time. I was talking to a friend who's doing the same race, and we're kind of in the same boat where you're in a big training, like the last big training block, and kind of everything starts feeling not bad, but just like, whoa, this is a lot. I'm tired. My feet are a little sore. I'm a little stiff. And you start kind of like questioning, like, are you ready? And it's like, well, yes, you are. You're just doing like a lot of stuff right now. So you're building up a bit of fatigue, and then you know you're going to taper it down. Right. So it's all kind of that mental game of like knowing like this too shall pass, I guess, which I guess is really good practice for when you're actually in it, because it's going to be a whole lot of that.
It's true. Yeah, and it's very tough. A lot of people struggle to have the consistency so that then they can eventually build up to this even heavier load, and then it's very tough because you get sort of almost addicted, not to use that phrase, but I guess using that phrase, to the load and the fatigue, and then you have to taper, which is the delicate part afterwards there, which many people find tough.
Conveniently, I'm epically overscheduled for the weeks afterwards, so I really planned to be, tapering to the best of my abilities, because I'm going to have so much to do to arrange all of the stuff that I have to do after the race.
Okay. Well, we have a nutrition podcast today. We have a registered dietitian on, which is very exciting.
Yeah, my friend Kristen Ziesmer, she and I have worked together a bunch over the years doing content for True Sport US, which is sort of USADA, U.S. Anti-Doping Agency's sort of youth sport arm. So we're always writing stuff for coaches and for parents and even for athletes. So it was kind of interesting to get to talk to her about more adult nutrition, although, for any parents of active kids, we do talk about, one of the things I really wanted to talk to her about is, how to think about your nutrition as an adult athlete, and then how to, kind of bring that to your youth athlete without, maybe doing stuff with them that doesn't make sense for kids, even though it makes sense for adults. Because there is a lot of stuff in nutrition that totally tracks for a 50-year-old woman who's, in perimenopause, but that obviously wouldn't apply to a 16-year-old boy who's playing multiple sports.
Mm-hmm. And growing. I think that's the big thing, is how do you account for that growth and the need to keep adapting and all the processes that go behind that. Yeah, it's a lot of food. Yeah. That's
pretty much the TLDR on that. Yeah. We also do answer a couple of listener questions that we'd gotten in. One about sort of being hungry an hour post ride and sort of going a little ham on the ham in the fridge kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, honestly,
did you say the ham in the fridge?
The ham on the ham. Going ham on ham.
I'm pretty sure you said the ham in the fridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Going ham on the ham that's in the fridge.
Okay. I don't know if that was
that is exactly
it's a great phrase, but I just wanted to call that out.
But yeah, I think that's a great question, and we kind of go through sort of here's all of the things to think about when that's happening, right. Because
it could be multifactorial.
So many factors that go into that, yeah.
And we did talk about that on our coaching AMA. We do a monthly call, at least monthly, with all the athletes that we coach, which is always fun. And so it sort of came out of that. We thought this is a complex question that maybe a RD would be well suited to sort of just hash through the possible iterations of things you might try, including talking to a registered dietitian about your fueling practices.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, before we keep talking too long, let's just get into this chat with Kristen Ziesmer. Before we do, just a quick shout out to our sponsors over at Payable. If you are looking for a way to, whether it's take money for a Girl Scout order or, run a fancy t-shirt for an event you're doing.
That's right. And we've done a lot of these in the last little bit. We've been doing it with our local mountain bike club. They've done custom mugs, so that we wanted to order the mug, which there was 2 iterations of the mug, and then we wanted to collect the money for the club. And so the club has a Square account and a Google form, and there you go. At the end of the day, it's whose name, where, what their address is, and then the money is collected, and the club didn't really have to do anything. So in this age of volunteerism being hard to find, no one has time, it is a fantastic solution for these clubs and just individuals who are trying to do things, like yourself. Molly's doing all these Shred Girl events, and so things like t-shirts and the registration for the event is, again, something that we're using this payable form for.
Exactly. So when you don't want to bother making an entire website around the thing that you're doing, this just lets you, take payments in a Google form. You can check it out over at payableapps.com/athlete for all of our favorite free Google form templates to get you started. And whether you have, Payable, Square, Stripe, there's so many easy ways to collect payments.
And I will say, I just got our team jerseys, or I should say my team jerseys for the year. It's myself and John Barnes, our Super Masters team. And we do have a Payable logo on the back, so you'll maybe see that at a race. Hopefully we'll be going quickly, or at least looking good while we do so.
All right. With that, let's get into this episode with Kristen Ziesmer. Enjoy. Kristen, welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast. I have to say, I am actually shocked that it's taken us this many years to get to this point. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I am happy to be here.
It's so funny to me. We've known each other for, years now because of a lot of the work we have done together with True Sport. This is our first time seeing each other on camera, which is
Right.
like a very funny thing. We're talking partially because you have this awesome new podcast that you started a few months ago now. So before we get into kind of all of the dietitian questions, I want to know, how's it going? How is the world of podcasting and all of that been?
Yeah, so it's been great. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. The podcast name is Female Sports Nutrition. It's basically centered around females and all of their specific fueling needs. I find a lot of female athletes in particular are under fueling their bodies. And so it's basically a proactive approach of how to fuel your body correctly for your sport, so that you are not doing your body a disservice and you're really depriving it. And then that's really hindering your performance and then ultimately your health long term. So the podcast is going really well. I am actually in the top 3% of my category for podcasts, which is great. That's, way better than I had expected it to be so early on. But, definitely still figuring some things out. So if anybody, wants to know about anything in particular, let me know what it is and I will be happy to cover it.
I love it. I love it. And I love that we're really kind of starting with the meat and potatoes here of this conversation around underfueling. So I would love to kind of get into especially unintentional underfueling, because I think that's where a lot of women fall, because we've, grown up with just such extreme diet culture for those of us who are, let's say 30 and over.
Yep.
And even younger athletes now, what I see is actually their coaches are, men and women who grew up in that same era and have some pretty outdated concepts around food, or, just ingrained thoughts about food and, those approaches and stuff. So, talk to me about underfueling. How prevalent is it? How common is it that we're underfueling and don't even realize it, especially?
Yeah. So I looked this up and estimates suggest that there's anywhere from 30 to 62% of female athletes may actually show signs of inadequate energy intake. And a lot of people have not heard of this term yet, but I think it's becoming a little bit more popularized, is RED-S. So it's just spelled red, like the color red, RED-S. And that stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. Basically, it's characterized by a significant imbalance between your energy intake, so what you're eating, versus your energy expenditure. So, what you're doing during training and just, overall throughout the day, energy that you're expending. So it causes this deficit, and then that's causing a whole slew of problems. So it can cause health problems, but then it also is going to affect your performance. So for one, it's going to decrease your bone mineral density, and then that's going to set you up for fractures and, other injuries. It's going to cause hormonal imbalances, which is really important for female athletes in particular. If you think about like menstrual cycles, also this happens in males too. It's not just, for females only. It can cause reduced testosterone levels in males, which is going to decrease your ability to build muscle. And that's also the same for females. Females do actually have testosterone in their bodies. It can cause you to get sick more because it's going to decrease your immune function. So basically, you can get, more colds and, the flu and things along those lines. And then you'll start to notice that your performance is just decreasing. You're not able to, lift as heavy as you once were, or you're not as fast as you once were. And then you can experience mood changes. So, just getting really sad about things or getting angry about things or feeling anxious a lot, decreased concentration, things along those lines. Those are all signs of red S. And like I said, red S is basically just like a fancy term for underfueling. I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, yeah. And I also kind of want to I want to click on a couple things you said there. The first thing I want to kind of point out is a lot of people kind of assume when we talk about red S that to be in that state, you need to be, super underweight. Like underfueled
Right.
implies underweight. But I think what we're kind of really seeing in sport now is, red S can happen to any body. So it is, very likely that, you know, just because you're in red S does not mean that you're at this like very low for your height or your body type weight. It can happen at any point. And often, like actually, what I've seen is weight gain can even be
Yes.
a symptom of red S, which is very ironic.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, like it does not discriminate against age, gender, what your sport is, what your level in your sport is, any of those things. It can affect anybody, like you said. So, I've had women that are in their 50s and they're like, surely I'm doing something wrong. I'm eating too much. And it's like, well, no, that's actually the opposite of your problem. That's why you're not losing weight is because you're not fueling your body correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, at that age, right now we're talking so much about perimenopause and menopause. And I
Yes.
mean, if there's one time where you need that hormonal support more than ever, it's definitely, in those years. And when you underfuel and you're training, you're really not doing your hormones any favors here.
Right.
We keep talking about the Stacey Sims, lift heavy shit thing and that
Mhm.
mentality, and that's fantastic. But if it's a, if underfueling is part of that, we're gonna
Right.
have some major problems here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to your point with the lift heavy, like I do agree with that, but at the same time, if like that's not what you've been doing, you can't just jump into that and expect everything to fall into place. Your body is going to revolt against you and you will feel like garbage. So like, stepping stones are really important.
Could not agree more. Um, Now, I also love that you pointed out red S can happen to men as well. That's sort of part of why we've kind of gone away from the female athlete triad and started talking about red S. Now, here's my like question for you. Do you think switching away from the female athlete triad being like that doesn't exist anymore? Do you think that's actually kind of done a bit of a disservice to women athletes because now like we don't have this targeted thing that we're supposed to be kind of on the lookout for. Now it is kind of this more amorphous, just I don't know, I picture just like a big red like bubble floating behind
Yeah,
us with
yeah.
a red S.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that female athlete triad has gone away, but Red S is definitely like a big umbrella if you want to think about it that way. And then female athlete triad is like a subset of Red S. So, it's a little bit more female athlete triad is a little bit more specific. You've lost your period for a certain amount of time, you have low bone mineral density, and then you are underweight, you can say anorexic, whatever. So it is a little bit of a subset, but I think that having a broader range to catch people kind of helps to prevent them before you get to that point. But at the same time, you also have to realize that like you may not fit the criteria exactly. You may only fit like a few little things here and there. I'll just use myself as an example. Years ago, I was training for a figure competition, which is under the realm of bodybuilding. And I was still getting my period, but it was on birth control. And so, like, I wouldn't have fallen into that. But at the same time, like everything else, I met the criteria on, and then I actually have a girl that I'm working with now that she went to the doctor that I assure you is struggling with disordered eating. And the doctor was like, oh, well, your weight is, you're not underweight, so you don't have an eating disorder. So I think that Red S umbrella does give us a little bit more of a way to catch people before they get to a bad place.
No, that is absolutely a great point. Yeah. No, for sure. And yeah, I think the more we're talking about this with especially young women athletes, the more it's, so many research studies are coming out where it is talking about like a high percentage of elite female endurance athletes are on hormonal birth control.
Yes,
So all of the period stuff just doesn't even apply as a symptom.
absolutely.
And I think so many, like, we're finally starting to talk about that and realize that and recognize that. And I, like, just cannot stress how important it is that, like, you have to be such a detective now if you
Yes,
are on a hormonal birth control, because that doesn't count. That does kind of mask symptoms. So you have
yes,
to be paying attention to the more subtle signs, not just
yes.
the, oh, I get my period or I don't. It's no longer
Right,
that
right.
binary.
Right. And here's another thing. This is maybe going off on a tangent a little bit,
Love a
but
tangent.
I've had, clients where they've gone to the doctor because they're not getting a period, and then the doctor's like, "Well, let's put you on birth control." I'm like, "But that's not helping anything." Yeah, it's like that is just literally slapping a Band-Aid on the problem. It's not actually getting to the root of the problem.
Oh my gosh, you hit my like one of my number one pet peeves in youth sport
Yes.
nutrition for sure. Um, And okay, so I mean, we could kind of keep going down this rabbit hole, and I do want to keep going down this rabbit hole, but I also want to talk about the difference. Now we've kind of mentioned women who are in menopause, perimenopause, and we've kind of alluded to younger people. You and I have always chatted about young athletes because of the
Right.
work we've done with True Sport. We're talking about like high school athletes for the most part, maybe some college, but mostly about like young athlete side of things. And what I've always been struck by is, we've interviewed so many nutritionists on the podcast, and, I've written books about cycling nutrition for adults.
Yeah.
And what I've kind of realized in all of our talks is that, like, what works for adults, what applies to adults, does not always apply to the younger population.
Right.
And I'm now seeing, and we have a lot of listeners who have kids who are coming up in sport, and we are so excited about youth in sport. And my one worry is always that parents have the nutrition advice that works for them, or maybe, let's be honest, maybe it doesn't even work for them, but it's the nutrition advice that they're currently following.
Right.
Um, and then, they're kind of almost placing that same stuff onto their kids, whether it's, oh, my 11-year-old now uses Martin gels and like sodium
Mhm.
bicarb and like all of these
Right.
things. Or, I'm low carb, therefore, even unintentionally, the rest of my family is also low carb. So,
Right.
um, talk to me about how parents can think about fueling their active kids and maybe like some of the major things you see where it like, yes, this might be a thing that the parent is doing, but like, please don't have your kid doing this.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is, and there has to be a clear difference between the way that an adult fuels himself and the way that a child would fuel themselves or needs to fuel themselves. So, what I mean by that is, as you get older, your energy needs are going to decrease, and your needs for things like carbohydrates and fats are going to decrease because your metabolism is just not as high as it once was when you were a child. And also, you're probably not going to be as active as a child is. Plus, you're done growing. A child is still growing. So, a child is going to require one, more calories, but then two, they're going to require more carbohydrates because they're going to be more active and their body requires that extra energy to help growth happen, but then also, their activity level. So they're going to need more carbohydrates. They're also going to need more fat. I don't know that a lot of people really realize this, but your brain is made up of fat. Like it is fat. So you need fat for that, you need fat for hormones to happen in your body. Fat is a precursor to hormones, and it also helps with absorbing fat soluble vitamins like vitamin D, which is a hormone. Also, your brain runs off of glucose, which is the simplest form of carbohydrates. So if you expect your kid to go to school and perform well on a test and then have practice after school with no carbs in their system, they're not doing so well, so they need those things for sure. Also, children are going to basically their stomachs aren't as big as an adult, and so they can't hold as much food at one point in time. So they have to eat more frequently, which I will admit, this does kind of drive me crazy with my own kids when, I feed them breakfast and then like 30 minutes later, they're like, I'm hungry. I'm like, how could you be hungry? I just fed you. But that is how they operate. And obviously, as they get a little bit older, that does get a little bit better. But still, they do require more food and more frequently throughout the day. So doing something if an adult wants to do the paleo diet for themselves, fine. That's fine. But you need to have something available for your child to eat on the dinner table. So like if you made let's say grilled chicken and some asparagus and I don't know, some other vegetables because you're trying to watch your carbohydrate intake, you need to have something like potatoes or rice, some butter, things along those lines so that they can get in the needs that they need, and not just basically bypass that because of your diet.
Love it. Love it so much. Um, And then, where do you fall or when should kids start kind of thinking towards that sports nutrition where it is like the gels and the drinks and all of that? Because I know that's a question that I'm hearing from a lot of parents that I know whose kids are, hitting those like preteen, teen years. They're, training a lot more. Cannot believe how much some kids are training. Holy moly.
Yes, yes, yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, it was not like that when I was a kid for sure. It has become very competitive these days, and I would say there's not going to be like a certain age really that is like the threshold, but I think it really just kind of goes back to like how much are they training and are they able to keep up with everything through real food sources. So real food is always going to be our best line of defense over a supplement because our bodies are going to absorb that, utilize that. It's more bioavailable to our bodies. It's just a better source, than any type of supplement goes. So plus, not only mention it's cheaper, and if they ever get drug tested, then they are going to be they could be getting flagged for some substance that's not supposed to be in there. So anyways, let's talk about, specifically like electrolytes, because I think that's a big thing right now. Once you get to the point where they are training multiple hours a day, especially if it's really intense, it's hot and humid, the best thing that you could do is honestly just put some salt in your water. But if that is not cutting it, or let's say your kid is like, this is disgusting, I can't do this, then they can start doing electrolyte supplements. But I would really try to do some of your own things at home first. So, for example, you can make your own homemade sports drink. This is just a combination of water, honey, a splash of juice, and a pinch of sea salt. I promise you won't even taste the salt in there. But if they really don't like that, or maybe that's not even realistic for them to get in, then you can go to a packet, like an electrolyte packet. I would not go as far as something like an Element or the LMNT packets because those are 1,000 milligrams of sodium. That's a lot. That is a lot for a child. So I would stick with something that's more like 500 milligrams or less. So liquid IV, or you could even do like Propel or Gatorade is fine as well. You don't need anything fancy. What I personally do is I carry around with me these little True Lemon packets. So there's dehydrated lemon and dehydrated lime. They also have strawberry lemonade or, just lemonade packets. And I'll put that in my water and then I'll just put salt in my water as well. So, like I said, you don't have to do anything fancy. You could just stick with, real salt. And I understand that I'm an adult but I will say I'm a little bit of a special case because I have a medical condition, Addison's disease, where my body does not reabsorb salt. So I constantly have to take in a lot of salt during the day. So if you want a salt expert, here I am. Um, so anyways, I don't think there's any particular time where, like I said, an age threshold, but it's kind of like when real food is not cutting it, then you can go to a supplement. But I would really start easy into that and not go like full bore and, oh, I need to have, the most expensive gels or the most expensive electrolyte packets, because quite honestly, an element packet is just a half a teaspoon of salt. It's a very expensive half teaspoon of salt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Could not agree more. And okay, now that we're mentioning electrolytes, this kind of leads into one of the other questions I had for you, which is just, we're getting into summer, it's hot, and I know this is the time of year where, it really is the extremes, right? Like when it's very cold, we're less inclined to want to eat or drink. And I mean, quite literally, like it can be difficult too because your hose, like for me, when I'm running in freezing temperatures, my hose is frozen. So like half the time I'm like trying to get like a slushy out of it, and it's not a great situation. Um, and then in the summer, you're kind of like, oh, it's so hot that all I want is just like straight water. Like even having like the electrolytes in it doesn't feel as satisfying as just like that
Hmm.
cold glass of water. And I feel like as I'm saying this, I'm like now thirsty.
Yeah.
But how can we make sure that we are, taking in enough in the heat, especially considering, most people listening to this, like this is actually their prime race season is the summer. Um,
Hmm.
when it's the hardest to be taking
Yes.
in the calories and the electrolytes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first things first is I would make sure that you know what your sweat rate is. So a very easy way to do this, I actually have a link for it on my blog, but an easy way to do it is just to weigh yourself before you start training. So you want to pee first, weigh yourself, write down what that number is, and then you go out, you do your training, just to make note of how long you're training for. So let's just say it's an hour. Come back, weigh yourself again, and notice if there's any change in your weight. So if you are losing weight, then okay, I'm not drinking enough during that training session. So that means you need to drink 24 ounces of fluid for each pound that is lost during that training session. Now, I also failed to mention that you need to keep track of how many ounces of fluid that you're taking in during that training session. But a lot of people don't want to drink anything because, let's face it, it's a pain to carry something with you or stash it away or whatever. So anyways, like I said, 24 ounces per pound loss, but then that does give you an idea. Like if you've lost a pound of fluid during your training session, you need to multiply that by 16 ounces. So that means your sweat rate would be 16 ounces if you were out there for an hour, 16 ounces per hour. Most people are going to be around the 30-ounce mark, so 30 ounces per hour. And of course, some people are higher than that, some people are lower than that, but that's usually what I find. And so it's really important that you are drinking on a schedule while you're training, but then also throughout the day. So a really good rule of thumb as your minimum amount of fluid per day is just half of your body weight in ounces of fluids. So if you're 150 pounds, divide it in half, and now you're at 75 ounces per day. That's outside of training. That's not talking about during training. So you use your sweat rate during training. You also want to recheck your sweat rate multiple times while you are training because that's going to change based off of the weather. The hotter it gets, the more humid it gets, that number is going to increase. So you want to make sure that you're rechecking that, but you're also making sure that you are, hydrating properly throughout the rest of the day. And, if you're starting with half of your body weight in ounces of fluid and that's just not cutting it, you could always bump it up from there.
Hmm. I really wish, and maybe someone has invented this and I just don't know. I would love to see a smart scale that lets you get on it and like shows you these, like you had like an app that was attached to it that would show you these numbers without showing you your weight.
Yes,
Because I'm
yes,
like, I'm so anti-scale. Like I haven't
yes.
stepped on one in years. I turn around at the doctor's office. I'm just, you know what? I've been so indoctrinated by,
Mhm,
diet culture of like growing up in the 90s and early aughts that like
mhm.
there's no number that I'm going to hear that I'm going to be happy about. Or if I do
Right.
hear a certain number, then I'm going to be so fixated on it that it's going to become an issue.
Yes.
I know that about myself, so I
Yes.
won't weigh myself, but I want this information. So like sometimes I will actually have Peter, my husband, like will actually check the numbers for me and I'll just get on and like
Mhm.
he'll do the calculations. But how do we not have a smart scale that could do all this for us yet?
Yeah, the only scale that I'm aware of that I've actually used with some of my clients, it's called my Clear Step, and it's a scale, it's a numberless scale, and it'll actually send me the numbers so I can see what's happening. But to my knowledge, it doesn't test, things like your body water or anything like that. So,
Hmm.
but at the same time, like if you have somebody that you're working with, like a sports dietitian, you can use that scale so that they know, okay, this is where you are and what we need to change based off of that. I think that the best thing that you could do for right now, as far as like with hydration, is to just notice how you feel. If you notice that you are getting a lot of cramps, well, you probably need to increase your fluid and you probably also need to increase your salt intake. If you are noticing that your urine is always clear and you're just peeing every 2 seconds, well, maybe you're overhydrating at that point. So those are things that you want to keep track of. And if you're one of those people that don't like to drink throughout the day, I really would say, okay, if I have 75 ounces to get in over the course of the day, let me divide that out, by my day. So if I get up at 6 a.m., I need to have 10 ounces at breakfast. And then by 10 o'clock, I need to have 20 more ounces. You get the idea, and you could just kind of divide it out however you want to. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah.
Yeah, this is the case for one of those big Stanleys that are really trendy right now.
Yes, I have a knockoff one from Walmart. And I love it because it does like it. I mean, I've always been a water drinker, but like if I have just like a little glass of water, forget it. Like I don't want to fill that up a million times a day. So the Stanley is 40 ounces and it has a straw, which is great because you could just get more in your mouth at one time and I don't have to fill it up a million times a day. So I love it and it keeps it cold.
Yeah. So yeah, shout out to Stanley's and Stanley knockoffs.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I resisted for a while, but I've definitely gotten one of the bigger ones. Although I had to get one that like closed because I always throw them in bags, and then
Oh yeah.
it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But truly, the Stanley trend is just wild.
Yes.
I'm like I love that we've made hydrating this like trendy, fashionable it girl
I
thing. That's great.
Yes. And the,
Perfect.
the hilarious part to me is when I was growing up, my dad had a Stanley like thermos, that he would like
Yeah.
put soup in. And it was like just like an old man, thing that you bring to like a job site. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, Stanley has become, this trendy thing where like kids are getting bullied over them at school. It's crazy to me. So
Yeah. No, it's hilarious. I mean, it's sort of like the New Balance sneakers being really trendy, right? It's like stuff that your
yes.
dad wore that you're like, oh God, Dad, you're wearing that. And now you're like, oh my God, my kid is wearing that. And they look
Yes.
so
Yeah.
cool.
Right.
I love it. Okay. And on the note of, what we're eating during training, we talked about drinking during training. I think actually one of the biggest things that I've kind of had to come to terms with is actually bringing my pack and drinking on every run or attempting to drink on every
Yeah.
run. Not necessarily because I have to drink for like an hour long run, but because that way I stay in the habit of drinking during
Right.
runs.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
very quickly will fall out of that habit.
And I think that's a valid point because, I always tell people like we need to practice your fueling for race day or competition day while you're training because it's like the same thing with your muscles. Like you can train your muscles, but you also need to train your stomach. Like a lot of people say, oh, like I can't drink or I can't eat while I'm training. My stomach gets upset. But you can train your stomach to accept food and fluid. Plus, you need to get in that habit of training with it so that you're actually doing it come race or competition day.
Exactly. Yes. Now, granted, the skin on my back is slightly messed up now because of wearing the pack so much in such
Oh,
sweaty conditions, but win some, lose
yeah,
some.
yeah.
Such is life.
Right.
Actually, for another article I was working on, an RD friend of mine, I was talking to her about it, and her suggestion was like even during short, hard workouts, which is like when I tend to train without my pack, she's like, no, you should be actually trying to even drink in the hardest parts of the
Yes.
workout. So your gut knows how to deal with like, oh, this is really hard, but also I need fuel.
Right.
And it was like this weird unlock where I was like, how have I never thought about that before?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I mean, like you're your body is very complex and it's very smart, and it does, kind of lessen some symptoms, or not symptoms, systems, when you're, amplifying other systems in your body, but you need to make sure that you are being able to work both at the same time for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, on that note, in endurance sport right now, the trend really is just like more, more, more in terms of carbs. We've really gone away, a few years ago. It was like, oh, you can, keto while you're an ultra runner, ultra distance
Hmm.
cyclist was very trendy. And now I feel like we've come full or like full 180 here where we're like,
Right,
no, we need all of the carbs, like literally all of them, just dump truck levels, just in. Um,
right.
Any tips on, first of all, like what is your thought? Like, is there a cap? Are we learning that there isn't a cap? What's the situation on like how many we can take in? And also like how do we gradually build that up? Because going from 0 to 120 grams of carbs in an hour is not going to be great for you.
No, not at all. I'm going to say the word that everybody loves to hate, which is moderation. So, really, there is actually a cap on carbohydrates per hour. The problem if you're taking in too much of it is that it's going to cause, one, it can cause a lot of GI issues. If you're one of those people that you get runner's diarrhea, you're always running to the bathroom, your carbohydrate intake, yeah, can cause it. It could be the types of carbohydrates that you're taking in. So if it has a super high osmolality, meaning it's like a lot of sugar to not much fluid, or it's a lot of fiber, that is going to cause issues as well. But the thing is, your body can only utilize so much at one time. So if you're taking in more than really like 60 to 90 grams per hour, it's going to cause the GI issues. It can cause you to become your muscles to become more stiff. And so you're actually decreasing your performance at that point, which was obviously not going to be helping you. So really 90 grams is probably reserved more for those ultra endurance runners. So like if you're doing like an Ironman, for example, 90 grams per hour, that's fine. But if you are doing a marathon or anything less than that, or if you are cycling, doing, a 50-mile ride, even a 100-mile ride, I would say still stick with the 60 grams per hour. But if, you're doing much more than that, then I would go ahead and bump it up. But that is something, like I said before, that you need to train your stomach to accept that, and you need to train your muscles to be able to utilize that as you are, cycling or running or whatever your sport is. So you can't just go from 0 to 90 or 120 or whatever. You really need to slowly increase that. And I would make sure that you are doing that with your training. So, for example, if you are going to be out for an hour or less, 30 grams of carbs is fine. If you're going to be out for a couple hours, 60 grams is going to be fine per hour. And if it's going to be an all day thing, then yeah, bump it up to 90. But as your training varies, you want to make sure that you're varying the amount of carbohydrates per hour with it.
I like that. And I mean, I think it's also that variation is good because it does teach your body how to like deal with the different amounts and like, you know, clear them and use them, more efficiently. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And, any thoughts on like what's your take on, I know it's going to be an it depends, but we have sports drinks, gels, chews, bars, Whole Foods, all of that. Where do you have people start if people are, not super great at fueling? We're gonna say, like, they're not unaware of all of these things, but
Hmm.
they're very
Yeah.
bad at utilizing them.
Yeah, I think the best place to start, honestly, is with using like a sports drink, because a drink is going to sit a lot lighter on your stomach. It's not going to give you that overly full feeling. It's going to pass through your body a lot more quickly. Plus, you're able to get in, some sugar, which is going to give your body some carbohydrates, some fuel, and sugar is not going to be awful, to have every now and again when you're training. But also it's killing two birds with one stone. You're getting that fuel, plus you're getting the hydration in. From there, you can really what I always tell people is kind of like play around with what works. I tell people to try things that they what they like outside of training. So one time I was training for a half marathon and I tried Generation UCAN. Have you ever had that before? It's
Hmm.
terrible.
Yeah,
Um, it was really
unpleasant.
gross. Yeah. So
Apologies to anyone that likes you can, but like, yeah,
yeah,
atrocious.
sorry. I know there's people that like it, but I don't. I actually drank some of it right before I went out for a run, and I legitimately thought I was going to puke, and I was like, well, there goes my whole run. So, try things outside of training and see what you like. Um, I would really mix things up between a combination of real food and gels. Like there are some people like doing gels or, sport beans or, like honey stingers or, whatever. All those things, it's like too much and it becomes like too sweet in your mouth after a while. So what I used to do is I used to take a Cliff Bar and I would just chop it up into little pieces and I would keep that with me and I just, take a bite here and there. I've seen people while I'm doing a triathlon, they have like bananas taped to their helmets. I mean, you don't have to do all of that, but what I'm saying is, mix it up so you're not just sticking with one thing over and over again because I can almost guarantee you that if you're doing gel after gel after gel, you're going to get sick of that sweet taste. Plus, it can cause a lot of GI issues after a while. So, first is, your first line of defense is to do a sports drink. After that, really play around with what you like, what tastes best to you, and then start training with it and see what works best for your stomach and gives you the most bang for your buck in terms of like fuel and energy during your training session from there. And I know that that's kind of like a broad answer, but it's so different for everybody, like I have some people that like they run well off of all those supplements, whereas other people are like, that's gross, I can't, I need real food. And then I have other people that do Infinite or Tailwind or something like that. And that's fine for them. So there's so many options, probably too many options at this point. But you just kind of have to play around with it.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, your tastes change over time too, right? Like something that worked 3 years ago, you do get sick of these things for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
And our guts change, like as our hormones change as we get older, as our fitness changes, all of
Hmm.
these things. So yeah, stuff that worked for you this year may not work next year, and so definitely it's a constant trial and error kind of situation for sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Side note, if anyone has any aerodynamics testing on this banana to helmet concept that was just mentioned, I would really like to see
Yeah.
it. Um,
I,
I'm like, the
I'm
shape actually could work on like an aero helmet.
Yeah,
So,
who knows? Maybe. I don't, and I always, wondered like, how did they get that banana off of there? Because, it's taped on, so you really need like two hands. And then I don't know. I never watched them do it, so no
yes,
idea.
if anyone has any more information, please get in touch. We're very curious now. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to bring up is a question that we actually got from a listener who was asking about so they're saying I'm looking for ways to avoid binge eating after hard rides. I find an hour or so after a hard or long ride, I'm raiding the fridge, not just having a meal. So I mean, I had so many thoughts on this, but want to hear from you. Let's talk why this could be happening. What I think most importantly, what reasonable hunger actually does look like. And then, how they can maybe stop shoving their head in the fridge.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is to prevent a binge. It is very hard while you are in the middle of it. You are so hungry that like you're just like laser focused on food. So the best thing that you could do is to fuel basically at the start of your day, or even if you're in the middle of a training session or a race or whatever, is to make sure that you start fueling on hour one and you're not waiting until you're getting hungry or you're starting to feel low on energy, So making sure that you're having a good sized breakfast, like people always think like, oh, I just need to worry about pre-workout fueling or post-workout fueling. And that is a piece of the puzzle, but that is not the whole thing. Like your day-to-day fueling, if you think about it, is going to account for a lot more of what your intake is going to be than just simply what you eat before. What you eat before is just topping off your stores is all. So making sure that you're having a good sized breakfast. I mean, depending on your size, this amount is going to vary, but I'll say it anyway. So really somewhere in the neighborhood of like 500 plus calories for your meals. If you're trying to get by on like 300-calorie meals, you might as well forget it. You're going to be starving and you are setting yourself up for a binge later on in the day. So making sure that you are eating at least 3 meals throughout the day and you are having snacks in between. I tell people, eat within an hour of waking up and then from there count off every 2 to 3 hours, maximum 4 hours to eat. So making sure that you're getting good sized snacks in between your meals. And then, like I said, having a good pre-workout snack. And when you are in training, you are starting on hour one with taking in carbohydrates. And I would suggest taking in a little bit of protein as well to help time release your energy out of your food. So then when you get done training, have something available with you, like a smoothie, or you could do a protein shake and maybe some crackers or a piece of fruit or something like that. You could do a yogurt, some granola, fruit, whatever you have, and eat that right away. One, that's going to help you with recovery, but then two, it's going to make it so that you are not so hungry by the time you get home and then you're just trying to eat everything in the refrigerator. I know that's like maybe a simplistic answer, but really that is the best way to do it. Now, if let's say you didn't do any of those things and you're like, I totally hosed myself today. What am I going to do now? What I would suggest doing is trying on your ride home, if you have a, ride home, swinging through a gas station, getting, like a thing of chocolate milk. Sometimes they have like bananas, like whatever, an apple, something along those lines, and just taking that in on your ride home. So then, like I said, by the time you get home, you're really preventing yourself from just going buck wild.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think really it comes down to like thinking about what future, like if you know that future you is inclined to stick your head in the fridge and eat
Yes.
everything, like, okay, how can we back that up and create these systems
Yes.
so that future me, even just when they open the fridge, there is like the yogurt parfait, there is like the good option, the option that we want to eat is right there
Hmm.
versus I don't even know what you'd have in your fridge that you like wouldn't want to go for, but
Right, right.
just
Yeah.
having that like, okay, I know I'm gonna have this, it's ready to go. I've meal prepped this, so when I do go to the fridge, it's there. But yeah, my rule that we always gave campers at cycling camps and stuff was like when you got back from the ride, the rule was there was no kitchen in your chamois, so you'd have to have showered and like cleaned up before you were allowed in the kitchen to make your snack, which
Hmm.
meant that at the end of the like towards the end of the ride, we'd be saying like, have you eaten enough that you can shower and like clean
Right.
up before you hit the kitchen?
Yes.
Because it was like a good indicator whether or not they'd fueled enough during the ride if they
Right.
could avoid like having to sprint for the fridge.
Right.
Um, so I think that's always like the good goal is yeah, that we aren't shoving our head in the fridge. That means we did good on our fueling. If we are
Yes.
shoving our head in the fridge, it's a good indication that our ride fuel needs some tweaking.
Yes, and I completely agree with what you were saying is like having something prepped ahead of time because if you have to come home after being out on like a 3 hour bike ride and now you have to prepare something, like forget it. Nobody wants to do that. You're exhausted. You're probably just gonna, swing through the drive-through or, get the frozen pizza or what, not like pizza's, anything horrible, but you know what I mean? Like just eat whatever is available in your house. So I think it's really important to, be a little more proactive and have something available. And this is a message to all the people back on the underfueling train that think, oh, if I eat after my ride and then have another meal, I'm going to gain weight. The research actually shows the opposite, that you need to fuel your body, especially right after your training, especially for females. Like you have to get something in within those 30 minutes after because that's going to help with muscle recovery. It's going to help you with, being ready for your next training, but then also it will actually help with losing some body fat and, building muscle, which then in turn helps with losing body fat.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned this because definitely my first thought when I saw that question was even just like, well, wait, like what does this even mean? Like when we say binge eating post ride, like
Yeah,
does that mean that like or an hour post ride, does that mean that we came home and didn't eat anything?
right.
Like
Yeah.
that we thought that we should just kind of get on with our day. And then an hour later, like, yes, we're of course you're ravenous an hour after a
Right.
ride,
Yes.
if you didn't
Yes.
eat anything.
Yes.
So yeah, this is where, it's that kind of ironic, like eating more at the outset actually does prevent eating at a less optimal time and actually works better for like the eating more actually works better for our bodies in the long run.
Right.
Who would have
Yep.
thought?
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's very counterintuitive, but if you treat your body nicely and give it what it needs, your body will actually do what it's supposed to do. Your body is way smarter than you give it credit for.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, before I let you go, the last question I want to ask is, are there any nutrition fads, trends, that kind of thing, whether it's, a TikTok trend or just like, something that just keeps popping up in headlines for even say like that maybe makes sense for the regular population, but that you're hearing your endurance sport athletes that you are working with or any of the athletes you're working with are coming in and saying, you're like, I just wish this stupid trend would stop.
Yeah. Um, I think honestly, the biggest thing right now is everybody, I mean, this is probably just like my own personal pet peeve, but is the whole spending $1 million on electrolyte supplements. Like it kind of drives, like, look, I agree that people need salt in their bodies. I am not one to say you do not need salt,
We are
but
very pro salt here, just to be
right,
clear,
right,
very pro salt.
right. I do not think that you need to spend $2 on a packet of electrolytes when all you need is salt. And so, like, going back to the element packets, I'm sorry, I'm, kind of throwing some shade on element, but, it's like with those packets, yes, it does contain potassium and it contains magnesium, but you don't really need those things right after training. Yes, you do lose some of those in your sweat, but I guarantee you, you're getting those in while you're training with whatever food that you're taking in. You're going to get potassium out of fruit. Like people would say, oh, muscle cramping is potassium. It's actually not. Like the research shows that it's sodium, and sodium is salt. So just take in some salt. I think that's the biggest thing that I see is you don't need to spend all that money. There is a lot of people that are also doing, like trying to combine keto and intermittent fasting and still training, which is like a major no-no. One, as a female athlete, you should not be doing intermittent fasting. That really messes with your hormones. But then two, as an athlete, like why are you trying to get better at your sport, or are you trying to get worse? Because that's going to intermittent fasting is going to cause you to not perform very well. So, and definitely combining those two, the low carb and the intermittent fasting is like a recipe for disaster. And I've seen it. Luckily, I do think it's a little bit on the decline now because I think a lot of people have come to realize like this is not okay. But I have seen people where they've come to me eating 1,000 calories a day and they're like, why can't I lose weight? I lost weight the first time. And it's like, because you're eating 1,000 calories a day. You're not eating enough. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, you just hit like kind of the three major fads that I deeply wish would go away.
Yeah.
So right there with you. As someone who, yeah, very much enjoys just salt. Yeah, electrolytes have never really been my jam. I think the other problem I have with electrolytes, and again, like this is not even shade to electrolyte companies, like whatever. If that's how you want to spend your money, like by all means, spend your money
Right.
that way, fine. My issue though is that I think there are a lot of athletes that end up using electrolytes in their drink or like as their drink mix, thinking
Yep.
that's all they need, and then they end up not getting the calories that they need because the electrolytes are kind of providing that like they have that bit of sweetener in them. They're like, 4 calories in a bottle.
Right. Right.
So you get that taste and you're just like, oh, I'm good, and
Yes.
you're not getting any calories.
Right.
So
Right.
my thing is always like, well, if you're gonna pay for it, you might as well do more of like a sports drink where you're actually getting everything
Ah,
all at once.
yes. Yes. And I'll again use myself as an example here, but like years ago, I did a triathlon and this was back in my disordered eating days. So I was one of the people that was, I'm talking about myself here under fueling. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I know what I was thinking. I just packed a Gatorade G2, like, no calories
Yep,
in
yep.
there. And, I did the swim fine. I made it to the bike and I was like, I have a really bad headache. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And I was like, I have a migraine now. Like, I'm gonna like have to drop out of this race. And then I started thinking through it. I'm like, I haven't eaten anything today and I have a Gatorade G2. Like, what am I doing? And so I stopped and asked a police officer that was directing traffic. And he gave me a Nature Valley granola bar, and my headache went away like instantly. So please don't do that. Don't do the 0 calorie drinks, like Liquid IV has sugar-free drinks and Element, those are sugar-free. Don't do the 0 calorie Gatorades or Powerades or things like that. That's not helping you unless you have actual food to eat on top of that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny, the number of women that I talk to where we're all kind of like in our 30s and 40s and we're like, oh, it turns out I'm actually in the best shape of my life now because I'm actually fueling appropriately, not trying to, stick to the like 1,500 calories that like Women's Health and Oxygen magazine were telling us to eat back in like
Yeah.
2007. Um, it turns out eating enough actually does make you end up
Yes.
at the best body composition. So
Right.
it is sort of this whole ironic thing of like underfueling actually leads to, the worst results in that regard. And fueling properly, it turns out, helps you get to the best version of you.
Right. 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 Again, counterintuitive, but yeah, it goes against everything we were taught back in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, if I could just go back and edit some of those, magazine covers. I will give Women's Health credit right now. They're actually posting a lot of their old covers from even, just like the early 2010s and stuff. They're celebrating, I think, their like 25th anniversary or something.
Okay.
And they're posting them and they're like critiquing them. And they're like, oh, we made a
Oh,
lot of mistakes here.
yeah.
And I
That's
really
pretty
appreciate
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the downside is they're also, showing the cover, so you're like, oh, I can get bikini body ready for
Yeah.
summer. All right, maybe I'll look that'll dish you up. No,
Right. Right.
it's so deeply ingrained.
Yes. Yes.
All right, before I let you go, let everyone know where they can find you, where they can, book a consult with you if they want, if they want to chat more, where they can listen to your podcast, all the things.
Yeah. So basically everything is on my website, which is elitenutritionandperformance.com, and is spelled out AND. So if you just head there, you can schedule a free, no obligation consultation with me. If you're interested in working with me, want to find out if it's a good fit for you. You can access my podcast from there. I have a blog on there that has tons of articles that I've written over the years with lots of good information that's, hasn't followed all the trends and all the things, but it's solid information to help you to fuel your body. So elitenutritionandperformance.com.
I love it. And we'll include that link in the show notes. Kristen, thank you so much for hanging out. I still cannot believe it took us so long, but I am so glad we finally did it.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.